We're back for part 2. Okay, so we are going to keep or continue our discussion by bringing up Rothenberg readings, racial formation, defining racism, colorblind racism, and white privilege. So we're talking about those articles now.
So, I don't know if you had a point, but I'm going to start. I had an issue with part of the defining racism. So they talk about how we define racism and how there's a misconception about how some people see racism as, they mostly see it as like more overt forms of racism. Mm-hmm. So like using slurs or, calling some, maybe unfairly hiring practice, something like that. Mm-hmm. But what the author says is that he defines racism as a system of advantage based on race, which I think that's, you can define it however you want. Definitions of words change, but I think you're doing a huge disservice to the word. Because so many people already see this as overt racism. They see it as they already see it as one way, at least how I interpret it. And by calling somebody racist, basically because they've had an advantage based on race, I feel like more people are going to just get more defensive about that and make the word useless.
Well, I think the word is pretty much already useless anyway, because no one actually teaches what it is anymore. From at Walker Middle School, I was called a racist once.
Really, in middle school?
In middle school, when I was teaching there, I was accidentally called Mr. Jarvis, who is one of the math teachers there. And I said, "Do I look like a 6-foot-tall Jamaican black man?" And they called me racist.
Called you racist?
Yeah, my students called me racist. And I turned around and I said, "Excuse you. I was describing him. How else would you describe Mr. Jarvis?"
Yeah, I think people throw it out way too.
It's thrown out way too easily.
Well, I think it's one of those words too that's can be so rooted in opinion, and as the book touches on, it can be.
I don't know. Can it be rooted in opinion?
So much deeper. Yeah, because I think everybody can have a different definition of what that means. In class, it was kind of talked about how we're not going to address people in the movie as physically know their name, kind of a thing, or it was brought back to the point where if it's if you're going to call him the whatever 6-foot-tall Jamaican, however you described him, if there was an opportunity to be comparing it physically with somebody else, the white person, and going back to that point. But that's not something I would never think to do that had I not had this class, to equally describe somebody. If I had 2 customers walk in, I'm not going to think of equally describing them physically for the purpose of not being racist. So
Wait,
I feel
hold on, sorry, I lost. What do you mean? You get 2 customers walking in, what?
Okay, so prior to this class, I wouldn't have ever thought to if I was talking with a coworker and they're which customer were you talking about? I wouldn't have thought I need to physically describe them equally. The black woman with long hair and the white woman with short hair. I would never have thought I needed to do that. That wouldn't have crossed my mind. Does that make me racist? I don't think so, because it's not overt.
I don't think that's. I mean, I can definitely see when they were talking about how when you describe people, majority of the time, the person who is of color is described by their color.
Their color, yeah.
But then, from my perspective, personally, I've always just said some white girl with blonde hair. I mean, yeah. I've even said some white. And I'm but I've always used color because for me, it's a description factor. Because when I was in undergrad, there's a case where there was an armed robber or an armed and dangerous man near the campus, and they sent out an email describing him, and they said it was a black man with a red hoodie and a prominent lower lip. And the campus cried racial insensitivity, and I still can't wrap my brain around the fact, around the racial insensitivity part, because from my perspective,
you see it as
it's a description.
It's
not I personally don't see all black people have prominent lower lip. It's I don't see that as a case. I saw it as if I'm walking down the street and I see 3 black men wearing a red hoodie, instead of me accusing all 3 of them as being a possible suspect, I'm gonna look for the one that fits that description plus the added prominent lower lip.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that as an extra description.
I wish we had a person in the car. We could be like, so what is your take? Because I feel like we can't even adequately speak on it.
Yeah, I know. But like I said, from my perspective, I've always used
Physical descriptions.
physical description. Like I was like my roommate in college. She was a petite white girl, short brown hair, very pale.
Yeah.
She glowed in the dark. I told her that to her face. So when they were talking about using descriptions, I was like, I've never done that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's doing the point I made here is, do we say that women on divorce court is typically viewed to be in favor of women?
Oh.
Are they sexist now? Because they equally benefit from that. Plus,
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
nothing that says that a man can't biologically give the child the same emotional needs of that other.
yeah. So
Yeah.
is that are they sexist by that? I you know what? I don't know. But I just think that
I think there's
It's doing
certain
it-
terms that shouldn't be as easily changed as they are. Like
So
racism.
who should define it? Who should that be?
well,
I think people should
person-
just be taught what things mean. Like
We all
racism
have
is
such
this.
different, like
racially
racism in your family is
insensitive.
be different than mine. So how do we make sure we're on an even filter?
Well, I've always used it as like the difference between like racism and racism. But if I say
But racism to you as a white person might be different from racism to somebody as a black person. Just so I devil's advocate here.
yeah, but I don't know. I think if you were to talk to them, I would like to think that the base of it is being discriminatory against me. Like you're racist, or you're making a racist comment, or because I would say I have a tendency at times to be racially insensitive. But I think being racially insensitive doesn't make you an outright racist. It just kind of makes you ignorant of your world. And I think that distinction needs to be understood. And racism, I don't think is a term that should be as easily changed as it is. And again, for me, it comes back to the school system. And the school system, there's major problems with the school system.
So can I just back to what you said with the Rockenberg part? Like what was the point you were trying, what were you trying?
I just think the point the point was is that it's gonna lose its meaning. I think the word racism or racist actually means something now. I don't agree with the fact that it doesn't mean anything, but I think if it just keeps being used as if people keep misunderstanding the definition, they're eventually gonna go, yep, whatever, I'm racist. I don't care. They're gonna eventually go like that. It doesn't mean anything.
Which could potentially go to the point that it just becomes a word that's just desensitized.
Just
No one
desensitized.
reacts to it.
No one reacts to it. And when somebody, I think most people when they heard, yo, you're a racist, they take a step back and say, like, really? Am I a racist? Like, what did I do? What if you just keep calling and you're like, they're just gonna go, alright,
Yeah.
whatever. You know?
Like, if you continually throw it out there, people are gonna say, okay, you know what? I'm sick of your crying wolf. In a way.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. But that was just my point on it. I didn't.
No, I mean,
think
I can agree with it. Again, you
it's
can
like-
tie it into sexism as well.
It's like
Yeah.
also
Like,
when you
I'm
use the word-
sexist because I don't necessarily agree with you. Like, okay, well, fine, I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm at that point with the sexism thing.
Or when they say white supremacy is another term. I don't think they mentioned it in that reading in particular, but I think.
Well, the white supremacy and the white privilege part was like also kind of getting to the point that it's almost overdone because I think they throw it out there without having some kind of meaningful discussion as to what it is.
I think
Yeah, I
they.
don't think people are really educated on what that means at
No,
all.
like I go back and forth between white supremacy and white privilege. And when we were reading an article where it's like unpacking invisible knapsack, I'm like, okay, well, by having white privilege, are you also saying that I am a white supremacist? Because I don't understand. And even when I was reading the article, it was just like, okay, what are you kind of getting at here? And like, I mean, y'all can like point out some other things if you want.
Well, that's actually a good segue because I actually did some. I happened after read it. I happened to see something about like this is the article that this whole where the term came from. This is like the origin, I believe.
Is it really?
It's
From
like
this very article.
From this very article. It's been like cited 1 billion times,
Oh.
and that it's like it's yeah, it's one of those like big definitive articles.
Yeah.
So yeah, what do you think about it?
I pulled a quote from it that I thought was interesting, just to like, as someone who doesn't hold a minority racial identity, I thought this was an interesting way that they put it to like parallel it. A quote from my notes that I wrote was, "I have often noticed men's unwillingness to grant that they are overprivileged, even though they may grant that women are disadvantaged." I thought that was interesting. I'm thinking like how that would parlay into me as a white person. Like, if I've noticed that white people are unwilling to recognize that we're overprivileged, even though I can admit that minorities are disadvantaged or underprivileged.
So yeah. Sorry. So you're pointing at I'm just trying to understand it. Like,
Yeah.
Let me process it.
It was no. I was just simply saying like that, translating this about how they took white privilege and they put it in a different context. I was just saying that I think that was an interesting way for me to understand it as somebody who doesn't hold like a racial minority. This was like a way for me to interpret it.
Yeah.
Well, with regards to this article, like when I was in City Year, we did an exercise that actually tied this in, and I didn't make the connection that that's what we had done in the program until I read this article, because they were asking questions. The way they set up in City Year is that they would ask a question. Okay, I know where I can go to watch a movie. Stand up if you identify with this. And so everybody stands up. But then as they get further and further down the list of questions, you start to see the demographic change of who can stand. One of the questions that you had was, I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed. So you had pretty much all of the white people in it. Large majority is a white demographic. But then
I don't know if I would have stood up for that as a woman.
I would have stood up, but it's like still looking at that overarching thing, and it's like, wow, when you really start to think about it, because then they got to the part where in City Year, again, you saw a complete shift in the demographic, was the question that they asked in City Year was, I know where I can go to find $5 or less DVDs. Or I know where to go to find DVDs for $1. They don't have enough dollars. Yeah, but at that point, the demographic in the room changed to mostly black and the Hispanic people in the community. There were some white people who stood, and yes, they do fit in and say they can't do it, but the demographic is still completely different versus the earlier questions. And it really just kind of got me thinking. I'm like, wow,
interesting, like random question.
Yeah, it's really random. Or like you could ask the question. Let me just look.
The Band-Aids got me.
Like the
hairdresser one got me.
Yeah. Somebody knows how to cut your hair.
Even the
Just
music
on
one.
like a side note, not at all a side note, it totally relates to reading. Whites are taught not to recognize white privilege, and we don't really know or see our whiteness. Can you guys remember like the first time you ever realized like I'm white, like definitively, or felt different like because you were white? Like I'm just curious about other white people's experiences of like being in a moment where all of a sudden they were like in that rare instance of like being a minority. Or like, can you think of an example?
I think I've kind of always felt like I was in a minority in a way. I'm not saying I have like the same instances, but that feeling of like not quite fitting in and feeling like I should necessarily kind of belong has always been there, but the white aspect of it didn't necessarily come in until I was like a sophomore, junior in high school, and I went from because science is not my forte. Ever. Never have been, never will be. You can throw a chemical in my face and I won't know what to do with it. And I went from being in AP physics, math and science kind of combo there, and switched out into a regular science class. And I was one of a few white people. But I felt even more outside my comfort zone because I was also the only white person from a middle class background. So it's like, not only am I a minority race in this class, I'm also like, I felt kind of like a super minority because I had more money and I dressed nicer and I obviously had newer things compared to the people who were of my own race.
So you found that in a classroom setting?
Yeah.
What about you? Where have you experienced it?
Similar idea. I did a year of, it's called like a year of service after I graduated college. Ever hear of AmeriCorps or Teach for AmeriCorps?
Yeah, year is through AmeriCorps as well.
Similar type, yeah. So I worked at a mostly Filipino and Mexican middle school, so pretty much 95% of the population was that. But at that time, I was 22, I didn't really think about it. I would say in this program, I'm very in the minority. And I'm especially after coming from such a masculine type field, sales, is very different for me to go into like to deal with the feminine energy every time. I feel like I'm very quiet. I feel like I'm very quiet in class. I just don't
we're
say
talking about
anything.
feelings. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't.
You feel like there's a lot of estrogen being thrown in your face.
So much
you
estrogen.
just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Poor Artie.
You're displaced from all your friends. You need some dude friends.
Dude, yeah. When I went home, I like overcompensated for it. I like smoked cigars, which I never did. I was chopping wood. But
That's
get back to it. Yeah, it is very weird. Like I don't feel like. I just feel. I don't know. I feel like I speak to people when they talk to me, but like I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't feel like a part of. I'm a part of I'm part of the group, So.
I can definitely feel like that at times, but I don't
It's
know.
hard to recognize, like,
Yeah,
your
because
whiteness.
it's like,
I wrote about that in a journal. Like, I'm not sure I know what this means.
yeah,
And like,
I think this is actually like a really good group for us because like the white privilege article started out from like the sexist point of view, not sexist, but like the feminist point of view, where it's like guys are kind of oppressive. So I think it's kind of a little bit of an opposite here, where it's like very, I don't recognize my white privilege, but in this class setting, I don't recognize my feminist, or like I don't recognize my femaleness, because Artie's the only guy.
Yeah.
yeah.
So I guess maybe I can again make a double connection, and it puts it in a much easier perspective for me rather than white privilege.
Yeah.
I think I can relate being aware of the fact that I am a female with only one male in my class, and I can relate that to being a majority because it's in my face every time.
Yeah.
Am I making sense when I say this?
Yeah. How like all of a sudden like you're a majority compared to Artie.
Yeah.
And, like our class.
Like the fact that I'm a majority in this country, because I am white, doesn't always hit me in the face all the time. Versus the fact that I'm a majority in our class because I'm a female.
Yeah.
I see it every day.
Interesting.
Or pretty much every class.
Yeah.
Plus because Artie and I are in all the same class.
Yeah.
So it's like I constantly see, okay, I'm a majority here.
Yeah.
So I openly feel bad. I'm like, gosh, poor Artie, like he doesn't know what to say. Like
But Artie, do you want us to feel bad for you because you're the minority?
No, I don't care. I mean, not that I don't care. I wish there were more guys in the program.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't even feel bad for me. I chose to do this. It's
Yeah.
not. But no, I.
So then I guess
It's just different. It's like I'm not used to it at all. I'm definitely not used to it at all. I come from a super bro culture of sales, super hyper masculine.
Yeah, you've gone from one extreme.
And
to
I
the
went from
other.
one extreme to the other, and it's very,
Culture
very no, yeah, exactly, culture shock.
Growing pains.
So I can't imagine. I don't know. I can't. They definitely helped me see what they were talking about in that
Yeah.
article.
Mhm.
I would kind of question a little bit how much of what Artie is feeling in this program, being the minority, how much of it is similar to what a person of color would feel being a minority.
Yeah.
Like, I'd be curious to figure out if, like, a lot of what you're feeling right now is similar to what a person of color feels.
Well, even like the way we discuss stuff in class, or the way we do stuff in class, I feel like there's, you know, step on your toes. We let everyone talk, and that's definitely, if I feel like if it was a room of males, you carve out your space. You gotta fight
See,
for your
that's
own.
so funny. Like, I feel like men
I'm
are
all
so
for
much
stepping up.
easier going compared to women. Like, women are gonna play, like, you're gonna know their opinions and they are gonna step all over you. Like, I find it so much easier to get along with men because men are so much more easygoing. And you can tell a male how you really feel, and you can say it, like, blunt and honestly, and nobody's feelings get hurt. It just is what it is.
That's
or
another
women,
problem. Yeah.
women just are like, ah!
Oh, you can totally say what you want to say with me. But I
But
think we got
anyway.
a little bit off
We're getting away
topic.
from the white
Just
privilege,
a
but
little
yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
But like I said, I would be very interested to see how much of a correlation there is between him being a minority in the class.
If there was a way to test that somehow.
Yeah,
Just like being a minority ever, it's so good because
Yeah.
I mean I racked my brain to think in thinking and processing like what is my whiteness, and I can only ever think of two experiences in the span of my lifetime where I was a minority. I have a Korean grandmother, so that's a unique experience, and when I was young she used to always take me every birthday to this special restaurant because I love Korean food. And I was always like the only white person in there, and if me and my family showed up before, okay, anytime, girl, I love Korean food. And so, anytime like my family and I showed up to this restaurant first, like they were so disrespectful. They didn't include us. Like we stuck out like sore thumbs. It was so uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until she showed up and we were like with her that we got any recognition. And like other people must feel that all the time. But it like me and my whiteness, it took so long racking my brain of thinking like that didn't just come to mind because I've had, you know, one birthday every year where we've gone and we've done that compared to what people just do on everyday life and experiences.
Yeah. I think I'm definitely more comfortable with being white, and I just accept it. Like before, sometimes I feel like with everything that's going on in the world, the fact that I am white, I feel like sometimes it's all the racism and things that are being said. It's said to make me feel guilty, and it's like, well, is that how people of color feel? Do they feel like our society is designed to make you feel to make them feel guilty for being for just being them?
Probably.
And then from the flip side, when they talk about like white privilege and all of this, it's like it's the flip side. Are you trying to? I just feel like there's like a circle of guilt going on. And I wonder, like, I don't think it's intentional. And if I do it, I'm so sorry. But does anybody recognize that?
If you're just like the feeling that we want to perpetuate is not guilt, and so it shouldn't be like a circle of guilt.
Well, I shouldn't feel guilty for being white because I'm just born white. And I don't want to make other people feel guilty for being born black or Latin or Asian because that's how you're born. That's how you were made. Like, you shouldn't feel guilty. And so I try not to make you feel guilty, so please don't try to make me feel guilty. I think everybody needs to stop feeling guilty for being who they are.
Do you think we're there yet as a culture and a country and a world though?
I think a large portion
people like think of the what's the movie called? I always Skin Deep. they touch on this exact thing, don't they? And they say like I don't want you to be guilty or feel bad or something for being white, or like I know your ancestors didn't own slaves or anything like that, but it's just like, what did they say?
So like, I need you to understand that this has affected me and acknowledge that.
And just acknowledge that, yeah.
And
so maybe not feeling guilty, but just acknowledging.
I definitely acknowledge it, and I'm at the point where I acknowledge it, and like I don't feel guilty for it anymore. I do think the country has come farther than it has since the 80s and the 90s, even from just 10 years ago. I think we've definitely progressed a lot. And I think that with the whole white privilege and everything that comes with that, I think it's slowly starting to fade out as the generations move on. I mean, we've got the baby boomers are all reaching retirement, and those are people who grew up in the middle of the civil rights movements. Like, their parents are baby boomers, and they're all phasing out. So I think as our generation gets older, the all of these issues of white privilege, I think, are slowly going to phase out. Or at least that's my hope. Because I think
what's gonna make the playing field more even? Like, how is it gonna even out?
The education system first. The education system needs to be catered more towards the culturally diverse.
Well, yeah, I think we can. Well, you can kind of tie that back into the prison articles that we read.
Yeah. Let's talk about those.
Jim Crow in the movie 13th. Yeah, I wrote about this in my journal this week about incarceration because I think it's honestly one of the more terrible things we do.
Yeah, I want to hear your guys' opinion because this isn't something that like I was very enlightened about.
I was not enlightened about it until I watched 13th. And 13th, like really like, bam, right to the solar plexus. Oh, it was so depressing. Like I didn't even realize like all of the issues.
Well, no, the thing that struck out to me was in the new Jim Crow. They talked about how they use private prisons to.
Yes.
Oh, the business of it.
Business side of it.
Oh my god.
That I had no idea about. I knew kind of a lot about the.
I knew there were private prisons, but I didn't realize that they were as prominent as they are.
Yeah, I had no idea about that. And then the amount of people locked up because of just drug offenses.
Yeah.
Just.
Well, like in 13th,
like
the difference
sentences.
But in 13th, the difference between crack and cocaine, it's the same damn thing.
Well, crack is a smaller amount. Crack is.
But it's still, at the root, it's the same chemical makeup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is the exact same chemical makeup, and you get twice, if not 3 times, worse of a sentence for dealing in crack.
Yeah.
And plus, they went in the film and they labeled it as cocaine was the white person drug, and crack is the black person drug.
Which totally just, like, proves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think any drugs should be criminalized.
Well, they even...
okay, but my thing, alright, so this is my flip side of the coin. I felt so enlightened and just, honestly, angry after all these incarceration statistics and stuff, but, like, human trafficking is something that, like, weighs heavily on my heart, and I've tried to get really involved in that community and such. And so much of what perpetuates that community is drugs. And talking to both victims of it, like the actual women themselves, and like police officers, I think I'm so frustrated by how minority groups, like they become, like drugs are the way that they become incarcerated, which is almost like a modern day form of slavery in a nutshell, to really, really boil things down simply. But like, yeah, how do you correctly like monitor and enforce?
So human trafficking, right? Human trafficking,
which is totally a different tangent. But I'm just thinking like how drugs play into that. So like, it has to be criminalized somehow.
Well, not necessarily. You could. Here's the proposal. The decriminalize all drug proposal is you don't make a legal market for it. So it's totally different than like alcohol or legal marijuana.
Okay.
So all the drugs would still be illegal to sell, but to be on those drugs, it wouldn't be illegal. They wouldn't put you in prison. They put you in some sort of alternative, so like a rehab facility right away. It's almost ridiculous that they can arrest you, in my opinion,
for something like marijuana
that grows out of the ground, or
for a life sentence.
For a life sentence, mushrooms. They grow out of cow feces. It's just for picking those and eating them, they can put you in jail for that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Even heroin,
Well, opiates.
Yeah. Oh, we can
Unless
sell them in a
you're in
pill.
a Native American
We
culture,
can give them away. We can go to the doctor and we can get so many medications. In America, of all places, we're so drug happy, and so how are some so widely accessible and okay?
Yeah,
but even then, they're not
doctors.
completely widely accessible because some, like in Asia, birth control is over the counter. Here, you have to have health insurance for it.
Yeah.
It's like our
Whole other tangent.
it was a whole other tangent, but it still ties into the fact that like everything is just so screwed up.
Because just like historically, how things get the way they are too. You just think of like the political factors of how incarceration is like the new way to manage that they've found.
Yeah. But
populations,
like in the movie
minority
in
populations.
13th, they one of the gentlemen, to quote him, he said that when did the drug issue switched over from being a health issue to a criminal one?
Yeah. Well, they talked about
because it
Nixon.
spoke to white voters.
Yeah, Nixon did it.
But even before that, like when Nixon did that, but like even before that, white people still had their drug issues, yes, but it was a health issue.
Yeah, and now it's a crime.
And now they make it a crime because if you make it a crime, then you can easily pin it onto somebody.
Yeah, or make a population a scapegoat almost.
Yeah, and then
or
it was
watch
over exaggerated
populations
with Reagan. When Reagan came in, there was that tax cuts for the rich.
Yep.
War on drugs and the whole just say no. When a large majority of the population, when they took a poll, said that they didn't think there was an issue with drugs anyway. So they perpetuated a non-issue.
Yeah.
And so with the issue with economics, and the tax cuts for the rich, you now have an even bigger gap between the poor and the wealthy. So the only way for a poor man to get money was to sell the thing that's being perpetuated that people now want because it's on the news. They're like, oh, well, what's that? I'll give it a try. Next thing you know, I'm addicted.
And then he's in jail because his community is already watched more by the police, and then he gets out of jail, and then he can't get a job because he has a criminal record. So what does he get?
And then we get to Clinton, and we've got the 3 strikes you're out.
Yeah.
The thing, one thing that absolutely pisses me off is the minimum sentencing, because again, in the quote, they say the discretion that was previously for judges, the judge's discretion was now transferred over into the prosecutors.
Yeah.
So you've got the plea deal and the whole
just plead guilty even if you didn't do it.
Yeah, even if you didn't do it, because then you have the whole Khalif Browder issue. 3 years. He was in 3 years, and that would have. I find it rather coincidental that him being in three years and he finally gets out kind of coincides with fairly close to what his minimum sentencing would have been anyway.
Yeah. And also this ties back to the Voting Rights Act. I don't know if they specifically mentioned it in this article, I forget, but if you're a felon in a lot of states you can't vote.
You can't.
Yeah. And it's I know in Florida they specifically have a problem where a ton of people don't have their rights restored, and I think it's on the ballot this year.
Well, you never have your rights restored.
Yeah.
The moment you're a convicted felon, you lose your right to vote.
Yep.
And
there are some states where you can get it back, but it's very difficult.
It's a very difficult process. But
and how many people of those that's a priority? Like, oh, I really need to go vote. Let me make this happen.
Yeah.
But you could look at it from a rehab perspective. Someone who voluntarily goes to rehab. So rehab, you could think of it as a type of jail system. Like you're under rigorous
that you have to pay for.
That you
can afford that.
Yeah, but you
upper white
people.
Class,
yes,
a higher class.
So financially, it's the culture,
not an option for a lot of people.
The colored community is just kind of screwed, which is sad. But if you look at it, it's rehabilitation centers are significantly more productive for those who have the abuse issues with substances.
Oh, of course.
But someone from but someone who can't go to
But
rehab
then
goes
that's
to
not
jail.
a business.
It's not a
Because we're not profiting if we send them to rehab. We're profiting if we can put them in these, to go to the Rothenberg mass racism thing.
yeah, but
article.
they could easily make a rehab center into something profitable. I could very easily see Alec somehow jumping on board with the whole rehab thing, because now that they've got so before there was the whole protect yourself. So Alec had the bill that they passed, which somehow allowed guns to be purchased, and who profited from that? Walmart, who was a benefactor of Alec. So then we had CCA, which was a benefactor of Alec, and CCA is a private jail. And they profited when a bill was put through, still tying into the whole protect yourself. We are here to protect
the more
you.
you go down the loophole, it's like, oh,
Yeah. So Alec, now that there's this whole, now they're pushing for jail reform, because they're seeing how many people are in jail, that 25% of the population of the entire world is in an American jail cell. 25%.
Yeah.
And so
well, isn't it
now
20,
that
we have 25%
of the world's
prison
population
population.
in
prison
prison.
population, yes.
Yeah.
Prison population. Not populate, not like global.
20% of the world's prison population
Yes,
is in
yes,
American jails.
Yes.
Yes. And so now that jail reform is slowly starting to phase out, Alec is stopped writing bills for CCA, and they're switching it over to kind of a new thing. So very easily they could switch it over into rehab. Let's work on our rehabs. Let's get rid of the whole
But how are they going to profit from a rehab facility?
because if a rehab facility decides they want to be a funder of Alec, the way it works is if you fund Alec, Alec will write bills that will somehow benefit you. So they could put forth a bill that says, okay, we're not going to make drugs a criminal act. If you are caught transporting drugs, selling drugs of some sort, we're going to put you through some kind of rehab facility. Either a rehab facility to get
Does
you
that
off
really
the
help
drugs.
the people who sell the drugs, or is that more for the people who are caught doing them?
Well,
I mean, I suppose if you're selling, you're also doing them too. But.
Yeah, but I'm speaking hypothetically, because I'm saying Alec could very easily say, all right, jail reform. So we're going to work on something that could help with the jail reform, rehabilitation centers. So for people who have been arrested for the use of marijuana or the use of cocaine or the use of heroin, change it from what it now is to what it used to be, a health issue. Now make it so that you, when you're arrested for it, you will not go to jail. You'll go to rehab.
I just don't see
Like the
the
rehab
government
will,
acknowledging it as like a cost-effective method, because you can't funnel thousands of people into a rehab facility and have it be.
but it's not thousands of.
effective.
It wouldn't be thousands of people. If it's from a drug perspective, they could very easily do rehab, and then they could do something else for everybody else.
I did some research on it because I did my journal on it this week. It would be 20% of the prison population, which is around 2.6 million. Also 2.6 million. So it'd be around 600,000 people, which is not. I mean, we have 350 million people, 330 million people here.
Well,
So it's not-
300,000 was the number of people in prison back in the 70s.
Yeah. So
it would.
it would take a
it
lot of
would make
infrastructure upgrades because we definitely don't have 600,000 new available people for rehab facilities. We don't have the counselors. Because
Well, it would.
The resources.
the resources.
The
It'd take a
resources would
while.
just need to be switched. I mean, the infrastructure would definitely need to be changed. But with Bill Clinton, there was the whole we're building like the jail bill or the crime
Yes.
bill that went out where it was like
Architects
billions
have a
of dollars.
niche of building jails. Can you imagine going
Yeah.
into that as a profession?
We'll switch out the jails. Switch out the jails for a new rehab facility, and then you've got a high demand for counselors,
Yeah.
and so that would provide different kinds of specialty
Job
jobs
opportunities.
opportunities. So
Again, you
again,
have to get a whole mentality shift too, and that's the hard part.
but
Even
when you get
fiscally
presidents and everybody
everything
on
do it.
board, it's much easier to do it. I mean, look how quickly people's opinions changed after watching the 13th video. I don't know about you, but I was like, good God, I didn't know.
Mhm.
You can very easily change public opinion if you do it in the right way. Because in the film, we've got Lee Atwater, who was Reagan's campaign strategist. He said, you start out in 1954 by saying NNN.
Yeah.
By 1968, you can't say in. That hurts you.
Mm-hmm.
It backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. You're getting so abstract now. You're talking about cutting taxes, and all these things you're talking about are totally economic things.
Mm-hmm.
You spin it right, the public will be on board, and now Alex involved in rehab. And you've got new forms of jailing, which is now rehab. However,
use the power for good.
yeah, you could, but of course they're not, because they use jails for free labor now.
Yeah.
Because it still ties back
I
in.
made a list of all the things that they do for labor, and I was just blown away. Prison construction bonds is a profitable investment. Charges for prisoners and their families for things like telephone calls, like their only connection to any freedom. Nordstrom sells jeans called Prison Blues, and t-shirts and jackets are made in this Oregon prison, and the slogan is "Made on the inside to be worn on the outside." I lost it.
JCPenney does it as
Excuse
well. And even the benefactors.
Revlon, glass bottles and jars.
AT&T is a
Graduation
part of
caps
it.
and
Verizon,
gowns.
Walmart.
Chevron, Victoria's Secret.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, it's not like Victoria's Secret stuff fits me anyway, because you have to be a toothpick with big boobs.
Prison wages eat far below the minimum wage, so they're making something, but they're not.
Aramark, who supplies food for the jails, especially in the private jails, and
TWA.
they're worm infested.
I think we should
All kinds of things.
touch on some other things too.
Yeah.
We can talk about that all day.
I really
issues.
could. Yeah, I could go off on that.
Anyway, I don't know if we talked about racial formations and colorblind racism, but I had a point on that. Me and my girlfriend were actually talking about this morning. It talks about race as a social concept,
I'm sorry, which one are you on?
racial formations, and then colorblind racism, and it kind of tie in there.
Okay.
So it kind of talks about the history of race as a social concept.
Yes.
Kind of went over that whole history, how it started at Bacon's Rebellion, and the white landowners needed to teach the white people their whiteness and try to create division.
History is very biased. I don't really remember. I remember hearing about Bacon's Rebellion, but I don't know details about it.
I don't know too many details about it either.
Like,
but
even in the education system, it just kind of shows you how much, how much of disadvantage not being of the majority race is.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of goes.
Because you're not even, because you're taught history from a very biased perspective.
Yeah, it went into the different kind of how it's transformed over the years. You know, how races. I think this may have been this article, but they gave the example to go back of how Jewish people became included in white folks. Like what? And this is kind of a question I had for my whole class. Like, this class is making me see race more and more and more.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily the ideal outcome. Like, when I should see race in every scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Because
I hear you. You start to notice it in absolutely everything that you do.
And I feel like it affects me.
It's like a hyper awareness. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like it affects me, and I don't know if it's in a necessarily positive way. I think there are definitely some positive things that I've become aware of, but there are things like,
it's almost like walking on eggshells.
Yeah, exactly.
It always is.
Shouldn't the goal be to? Ultimately, the goal should be that race doesn't matter. We're able to see each other as not like racial.
I don't think
beings.
that's the goal. I don't think that's the goal yet. I think people want to be recognized for their race because minorities have felt like they haven't been recognized as who they are, as these complex minority individuals, and I feel like
but I think it's also they haven't necessarily been recognized as like full humans, because they touch on it on racial formation where they say what is race, and they mention how like when the New World was discovered with its people, it like shocked the senses, and it ties it into religion with the whole Christian idea of a monotheistic world. So all of a sudden, okay, this person doesn't look like me.
Yeah.
Well, God couldn't have been wrong. So obviously
how do we all get like
they're
this?
wrong.
Yeah.
And
you put them in the other almost immediately. So they're the ones who aren't human. And I think ultimately what they're trying to do is say, I am human.
Mm-hmm.
I deserve the exact same rights as you.
Mm-hmm.
And
you bring up such a great point though, because I feel the exact same way. I feel like I have this hyper awareness where sometimes I feel like, you know what, this is beneficial, but I noticed this. Or a lot of times I'm like, I noticed something and it's almost a little bit heartbreaking that I'm like, oh, like I used to be oblivious to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if I can't make a big change, like yes, we need to strive to be anti-racist and allies to people who are minorities, but I don't feel like I'm empowered enough to do that in a big way to make like this big difference. And so it's almost more frustrating to notice this stuff than
But with the hyper awareness, I come from a different perspective, as in like I am aware that I am hyper aware, but I don't let it affect me. And when I say that I don't let it affect me, I mean it in the sense that, okay, I'm going to go ahead and still be open and say what I want to say.
mm-hmm.
Because and I kind of used it as an action step out of my comfort zone a couple weeks ago in one of my journals, where I was like, okay, I'm going to talk more openly with people. And I ended up having a super, super in-depth conversation with a black man I met at coffee. And
So you met where?
at coffee.
At coffee?
At Foxdale. I went to Foxdale, and he and I had
like
a
in
long discussion, and I felt it
That's
was
cool.
so empowering. I talked about the multicultural class, and I talked
Yeah.
about where I come from, and he's like, you know, he likes that I was open to
Yeah.
talking about it, and I think that's the thing.
That's the point.
Like, instead of being hyper aware and walking on eggshells, be open to the uncomfortableness of possibly having that conversation,
yeah.
and showing them that you're either, and I say them in a broad sense, like whoever it is you're talking to, show the other person in the conversation that you're open to the conversation, that you are slowly changing your ways, because even
And that you're
having that
curious.
conversation opens them up.
Yeah.
And I mean, if it turns out to be a negative conversation, then you chalk it up as a negative conversation, but you still had the conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. Yeah, can't hurt to do it.
Yeah.
What else do we have?
We were on the colorblind article. Can someone elaborate on abstract liberalism for me and clarify that? Does
Okay.
anyone have like a good?
Yeah.
I couldn't
Okay.
fully
I
understand
kinda
that.
understand.
I was like, what?
So liberalism, you have to think of kind of like classical liberalism. Are you
Okay.
familiar with that? So think of
I think the
Enlightenment
liberalism part
values.
is tying it into the abstract.
What did you say? Enlightenment.
Enlightenment values.
Okay.
So like the rights of the individual are very important. That's the main one. I like. We're all responsible for our own, pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps.
Yeah.
The idea of what's another blanket on liberalism ideas, but the idea of that, like, you have sovereignty over your own ability to do what you feel like you should be able to do, as long as you're not harming another person in society.
Mm-hmm.
I think that may be the best way to describe. I don't know if I hit it exactly on the head, but I know that's one tenet of liberalism. And did you have a thought on that?
No,
You just
just
were
like
confused?
just in general abstract liberalism. I wanted to know if anyone could clarify or just like speak on that more.
Yeah, and so they go. Those rights were not extended to non-whites, basically.
Okay.
And that's bad.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Yeah.
think like they should be extended to them. I don't know why that's colorblind. I don't think anyone would deny that anyone should be denied those rights. Even though they weren't given those rights, I think people would say, yeah, we messed up on that one. We should be giving people those rights.
Mm-hmm.
But even when they're given the opportunity to give them those rights, those in power are still taking them away. Subtly,
Or
but
are we
they're still
not just
doing
like
it.
willingly giving that up?
I think it's an actual,
The
like,
drug thing
conscious
would be a good
decision.
example of that.
Or
Would be
even
like-
the Voters Act.
Yeah. The drug example would be a good one of that because you have the right to, I think you have the right to, put whatever you want in your body that you see fit. We don't stop people from, if they want to eat themselves or drink themselves to death, they're going to die at a very young age, but we don't stop people from that. And that, I think, yeah, that's the problem I have with it.
I just kind of found that article just confusing just in general, because the moment you throw in abstract liberalism, I'm like, whoa, really?
Yeah,
I don't understand. I
That's
truly just did not understand.
I think you need to know a lot more about.
Like, I get colorblind. Yeah. And there's a great TED talk that talks about being colorblind. And that's where I got the kind of how the racially insensitive part. I kind of picked it up from the TED talk where she's like, I'm not colorblind. I see color. I see color everywhere I go. Can I be racially insensitive? Yes, I can.
Yeah.
But being colorblind is almost as bad as being outright racist, because before you are acknowledging our differences and oppressing me for those differences, whereas colorblind is completely ignoring the differences and not helping me out of the oppression.
Yeah.
So they're both awful.
Yeah.
What else have we not touched on? We're
We
running out
have
of time.
not touched on the Voters' Right Act.
No, we did.
Not really.
Briefly, you're
Briefly.
impassioned about it.
I
Bring it
am
up.
so bothered
Bring it up.
by that entire situation.
Yeah.
First of all, Congress didn't
As you
keep up.
should be.
Well, Congress was using a formula, as they put it. They were using a formula that's over 40 years old. So you know what? It is your own damn fault that the Supreme Court ruled against this ruling. However, instead of ruling that Part 4B is unconstitutional, I would say Section 4B is unconstitutional now, and instead of completely writing it out of the Voters' Right Act, say we need to go into some kind of remediation where we will update it instead and not completely get rid of it.
I think they don't have any authority to do that, though.
I wish they did.
Yeah.
Because 5 years after this ruling, almost 1,000 polling boxes polling locations were closed, and they were in predominantly African American communities.
Yeah.
And so
No, listen, I'm not saying it's right.
it's not right, but it bothered me that it still even happened.
Yeah.
Like, how it happened in 9 states that still have racist issues,
So it doesn't seem
racial
even coincidental.
discrimination.
You can't be like, wow, look. It's just
yeah,
like it feels so intentional.
There's a reason
Yeah, it's
that
racially charged.
these 9 states are in the South, and they needed to have pre-clearance before making any changes. There's a reason that was there. So instead of discontinuing it,
It's like the
because
safety, like the baby lock on cabinets. You just gotta keep everybody in check.
yeah, like I'm not saying you will, but you had a history of doing it. So you know what? We're gonna go and fix it. Congress seriously dropped the ball by not updating the formula. Like, look at it now. Or, you know what? Look at what has happened since it was deemed unconstitutional, and go and say, okay, we need to reenact it with a new formula. I think they need to step in, because 1,000. It was 1,000, and that's bold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we did not touch on?
We bled together, I think, all of the Sioux and Sioux. We didn't go into specifics about like Asian, Pacific Islanders, or Latinos and Latinas. Well, a little bit.
We can talk about it. Do we have to read the Myth of the Minority? Did everyone read that?
Are you on Rothenberg? Right?
Yeah, Rothenberg.
Let me check the reading.
What did you say? The myth of
the
the?
myth
I
of the
feel like.
model minority.
Oh, yeah.
The myth of the model minority.
Yeah. I think we did.
Yeah, that was a
Okay.
requirement.
Yeah, that was interesting. I didn't really think about that. Where it talks about basically Asians in the 60s and 70s came over here to get or with bachelor's degrees, and they were given, basically a leg up. The more Southeast Asians that have come over later have not been doing as well. And this myth of Asians as the model minority is kind of is what basically the title says is a myth.
Yeah.
I thought it was
That's
interesting. I never
interesting
really
that.
thought about that. I hadn't really ever, no one's ever really brought that to light for me.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of touch on that in Sue and Sue as well as the success myth of Asians and how you kind of counter around that. Don't assume they're all the same. Basically, they've all
got exceedingly different cultures.
exceedingly, yeah, exactly.
And if you look at them from an overhead perspective, they seem all the same, but they're not. One example from my experience working with different Asian cultures, because I really like Asia. I would say the most conservative out of all three named Asian countries. We've got China, Korea, and Japan. The most conservative of those three, I would say, is most likely South Korea. Public displays of affection is not a thing. One way that they show affection for their partner is by wearing matching outfits when they go out in public.
That's cute.
It's really cute, but you won't really see them
That's
holding
funny.
hands. And that's slowly
I didn't know that.
changing as the elder generation dies out, but even then, you won't see them kissing on the street.
Yeah.
And in Japan, they're definitely not that conservative anymore. They've got an entire festival dedicated to the penis. And they've got girls wearing headbands and popsicles and guys doing the same thing. So they're very much not as conservative as they used to be.
Yeah.
And in China, they're all about coming and giving hugs and like kissing someone in public. Is it to the extent that it is in the States? Definitely not.
Yeah.
But
But it
unless
just goes
you
to prove that point. Like all Asian cultures are so incredibly different, and
They
yet
are.
we lump them together.
Yeah, and I think that's because a lot of their culture is kind of the same overall. There's that drive to, there's that honor system as a collectivism. There's that honor code that they have, like don't shame your family, and it's little things like that that I think that we see as an American culture and an American society. I think we pick up on those similarities and make the assumption they're all the same.
Yeah, we all assume the universal.
Yeah.
We're all the same. We're all different in some ways, and we're all.
Yeah.
Goes back to
I
that
would-
model.
That model, yeah.
I would almost say from like a children's developmental perspective, if we want to look at it this way, America is very much in the middle school phase where
We're new. We're real new in the world.
We're super new and we're super young, but I would almost say in the way our society works, we're kind of like a middle schooler. We strive for individuality, but yet we hang out with people who are most similar to us.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Cool
Interesting
analogy.
analogy.
We're in the middle school phase.
We're all middle
That's funny.
schoolers.
We're teens. America's a little teenager right now.
We're tweeny birds.
Not quite sure who we are, who we're gonna be.
Yeah.
We're tweenies.
We kind of talked about.
We're not even in high school just yet.
We kind of touched on Latinos. We talked about immigration.
Yeah. Did anyone read anything from the Rothenberg that, like, the articles that you guys selected? I know we talked about it, like, briefly what we did before we actually started, but is there anything that anyone found particularly, like, moving or enlightening that you guys want to pull from the specific Rothenbergs you guys read individually?
Not really. I was a little disappointed, though, that we didn't touch much on the Native American cultures.
I read something about that. I read something on the
Yeah.
Please
Yeah.
talk about it, because I have near and dear affections for the Native American culture, and I wish we touched on it more.
So I read the Florida State Seminoles, the champions of a racist mascot, and it basically goes into the history of the mascot and how the people in the stadium are acting. I think they do this.
A little thing
Their
or something. There's a
chop
hand movement.
gesture.
Yeah.
It's supposed to symbolize a tomahawk.
And they talks about how
I'm an FSU fan, by the way.
the
Not devout, but I am.
I talks about how the Florida State claims that the Seminoles have given them permission to use that and they're okay with it. And I guess our author says that's completely false.
Who's the author?
I don't know the author's name. I don't know if he was Native American either.
What was the article called? I'll see if I can find it online.
The Florida State Seminoles, the champions of racist mascots. And then the last lead kind of touches on the argument, like, they wanted, the argument is to change the name, but every time this gets brought up in sports culture, it's like, well, where's the political correctness going to end?
Yeah.
And he says that it's a bad argument because, I think he says, would you be offended if, are you offended, are tall people offended at the Giants? Or like, what was the other one he used? It was like, and then he says it's an insulting argument because there's been a history of discrimination amongst Native American people.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why people hold. I'm a big sports fan.
If I read the name aloud, would you recognize it?
Maybe.
Dave Zirin.
The Florida State. Yeah, no, that's it.
Is the article?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I found the article online, and it says, like, do you think Redskins is offensive and Seminoles is not because it has tribal approval?
Yeah, no, I don't know. Here's my thing, like...
Is it right to, like, appropriate a culture, though, with, like, financial gain of any kind?
Well, I don't even know why you would care that they changed the name.
Well,
like, they changed the name of the Tampa Bay Devil Rays to the Tampa Bay Rays a couple of years ago.
That's true.
Like, to me, it's something, like, I get it as a long history of them being the Seminoles, but...
Okay,
whatever,
I would
you're not gonna
enjoyed this article. If I read this article, I would have rather have had it be written by someone who is Native American. This guy's Jewish.
What?
Yeah.
Minority, though.
Yeah.
We recognize you as a minority, sir.
But, playing devil's advocate again here, like, FSU states that they have Seminole approval.
Mm-hmm.
So then I would much rather talk to someone who is from the Seminole Nation.
Who gave them approval? I want to know.
I want to know who gave them approval. I'd like to know these information. I feel like sometimes there's a lack of statistics in some of these articles. Sue and Sue did it when they were talking about
who paid off the Indians so they could do this.
Well, then I would also wonder, were they paid off? And from the proceeds, because
they just took it. Well, they might have just taken it.
Well, you don't know. Like, I didn't read the articles. I don't know if there are statistics or there's facts or there's information. But when you say appropriating for profit, what if the Seminole Nation is getting a portion of the profits from the FSU?
Maybe. Well, I don't know.
Does that change it?
I don't know. You'd have to ask.
Would you still?
Think
but I'm saying, like, would you still say that it's, like, wrong if the Seminole Nation approves it and gets a percentage of the profits, like a royalty for it, because you are using a Seminole as your mascot? So do we get royalties?
I don't know. It's up to them to decide.
That's another rabbit hole you're gonna go down.
Yeah.
Because
yes, it is.
Do we have to donate to the Wildlife Society when we dolphins? I don't know. I'm not gonna lie.
My personal opinion, I wouldn't necessarily have an issue with that.
My personal opinion is like, I don't really. Team names are not, like, Florida State is not going away.
No,
if you change the name, people are gonna still follow the team.
Yeah.
Like, I get it.
And I agree. Like, I don't support the Redskins. I think their name needs to change, like, immediately. That one is straight up offensive. Redskins, like.
Oh yeah, that's like a slur.
Yeah.
Slur.
It's a serious slur that wasn't even coined by Native Americans. There's no translation of any Native American tribe that translates to Redskins.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Problematic.
Yeah.
The Seminoles, though. Maybe I'm playing devil's advocate. I would much like. I'm sorry, sir. You may be writing for the Mr. Dave Zirin. You may be writing for the sports, and you may be trying to be an advocate, but you are not a member of the Seminole tribe.
Maybe he's trying to be an ally.
Well, then are there references that he interviewed members of the Seminole tribe? In the article, did he mention interviewing anybody from the Seminole tribe, or is he just talking out of his ear?
He may have, but it didn't mention it in the article that he interviewed people from the Seminole tribe. I think he looked up some information that said that that the Seminoles didn't get any benefit from it, but yeah.
All right, y'all. I'm gonna call time because we're over an hour on this video and our other's 50, so we're almost out of time.
We're at 1:55 right now.
This is our team.
This is the conclusion
signing off.